Throughout history, humans have continuously exploited marine resources for survival and commercial purposes, in which the hunting and butchering of sharks and halibut is a clear demonstration of human attachment and dependence on the ocean. When ships leave port, fishermen carry long fishing lines, purse seine nets and specialized tools to search for traces of sharks far out at sea. Sharks, a powerful and ferocious predatory fish, are often discovered through large waves. Schools of small fish scurrying away or giant black shadows gliding quickly under the deep blue water. When a shark is hooked, the entire crew must join forces to pull this giant monster onto the deck, which is both dangerous and requires a lot of effort because of its fierce resistance. Once controlled, the shark is processed on the spot, first by cutting off its fins, the part with the highest commercial value on the market. Then cutting up its meat, taking its liver and other parts to make the most of it. Shark butchering is done quickly and precisely. Each sharp knife cut deep into the thick skin, exposing the solid muscle mass inside. Shark meat can be salted, dried or refrigerated for processing, while bones and skin are also used for many other purposes. In parallel with hunting sharks, fishermen also pay special attention to flounder, a famous flatfish with high value on dining tables around the world. Unlike sharks, flounder often live on the bottom, hidden in the sand layer, so catching them requires skill and patience. Fishermen use long fishing lines with hundreds of hooks dropped deep into the bottom or use specialized nets pulled close to the seafloor to herd flounder out of their hiding places. When flounder is hooked or entangled in the net, it is pulled onto the deck in a struggling state. Its flat and heavy body makes harvesting quite difficult. After being caught, flounder is butchered immediately to keep it fresh. The fisherman uses a knife to split the head, remove the organs and then cut out the white, fatty, boneless fillets. The flounder meat can be exported fresh. Frozen or processed into many high-class dishes in restaurants. The hunting and butchering of sharks and flounder reflects both the ingenuity and harshness of fishermen's lives, and also raises many conservation issues as this resource is gradually depleted due to overexploitation. However, in the eyes of those who drift at sea, each successful trip with a boat full of sharks and flounder is a worthy result of the work of daring, resilience and experience accumulated over many generations. A fusion between the need to make a living and the endless power of the ocean. When the butchering is completed, each shark and flounder part is neatly arranged on the deck. Some are immediately put into cold storage to keep fresh. Others are pre-processed with sea salt for long-term preservation. The sight of red shark meat and milky white flounder fillets lying side by side creates a scene that is both rough and attractive. Fishermen, with calloused hands and decades of experience, move constantly, using sharp knives to separate each piece of meat. Discarding unnecessary parts and carefully selecting the best pieces of meat. The next step is usually sorting. Shark fins are tied into bundles, ready to be brought to the mainland to be sold to traders. Shark livers are separated to extract oil, and the skin is sometimes processed into handicrafts. Meanwhile, flounder after being butchered is cut into even slices, without any blood or bones left, because the customers of this fish are often high-class restaurants and export markets. On board, the strong fishy smell spreads everywhere, mixed with the smell of sea salt and cold wind. creating a heavy but familiar atmosphere of any sea hunting trip. The fishermen chatted as they worked, the sound of knives hitting wooden chopping boards, the sound of waves crashing against the ship's side, and the rattling of the freezer made the space feel like a giant mobile processing plant on the ocean. At night, when the work was done, the deck was washed clean with seawater. The remaining blood and pieces of meat were washed away. Returning the ship to its original neatness in preparation for the next day. The holds filled with sharks and flounders became a source of hope. Because when they returned to port, these goods would be exchanged for money to feed their families, maintain the ship's operations, and continue the harsh cycle of making a living. However, deep down, many fishermen were also worried about the number of sharks and flounders offshore gradually becoming thinner than before, because massive exploitation had caused the ocean to lose its inherent balance. However, for them, each hunting and butchering trip is not only a job but also a tradition, a testament to the resilience and perseverance of people who depend on the sea, accepting danger in exchange for a living source from giant fish. Shark and flounder hunting trips often last for days, even weeks at sea, requiring the fishermen to be physically and mentally resilient. Every morning, before the sun has even risen, they have to wake up, check their fishing lines, nets, knives and holds to prepare for a new day. The rumbling of the ship's engine, the screeching of the cables and the sound of waves crashing against the side of the ship remind him that the sea is always full of challenges. When a shark is hooked, the entire crew pulls the rope in unison, gradually restraining the power of the monster as it struggles wildly, splashing water, sometimes even knocking the feet of the people standing on the deck off. Those moments are full of danger because even the slightest mistake can cause injury or fall into the sea. With flounder, pulling the net from the seabed is not easy, because the net is often heavy, entangled with sand and seaweed. When flounders are caught in the net, their flat and large bodies make it difficult to remove them, so fishermen have to quickly separate them for preservation. After harvesting, butchering takes place almost immediately, without delay, because the temperature and environment at sea can cause the fish to spoil quickly. Fishermen use large knives to make a decisive cut from the head to the belly. The organs are removed and pushed into the sea, leaving behind smooth white or pink meat. The shark fins are hung high to dry naturally in the wind, while the flounder fillets are wrapped in thick plastic bags and stored in a sub-zero freezer to preserve their quality. The scene of the deck covered with red blood mixed with blue seawater, mixed with shouts and urgency, creates a fierce but realistic picture of the seafaring profession. Skilled workers can cut up a giant shark or neatly separate flounder fillets in just a few minutes, proving their expertise and dexterity. Behind these trips is the life of the family back home, the warm meals of the wife and children, the money to pay off debts and repair the old ship. Each piece of shark and flounder meat brought to the port has great significance, both the result of hard work and the pride of people who consider the sea as part of their flesh and blood. Returning to the port after a long trip, ships loaded with sharks and flounders docked in the waiting of traders. Buyers and fishing families. The unloading work took place immediately. Each heavy block of shark meat was passed from hand to hand down to the shore, while the boxes of flounder fillets were neatly arranged for weighing and classification. The atmosphere of the fishing port was bustling at this time, with people calling each other, the sound of refrigerated trucks starting up, and the bustling bargaining like a special market amidst the fishy smell of the ocean. Shark fins are often bought by traders at high prices. They are quickly distributed to restaurants or processing facilities to be dried, while shark livers are transferred to oil extraction factories, and the meat is transported by refrigerated trucks everywhere. Flounder with smooth, white fillets are often carefully selected. The best part will be exported to demanding markets such as Japan, Korea, Europe, while the rest is consumed domestically, processed into popular dishes. For fishermen, the moment the catch is sold is when the effort and danger at sea is converted into specific value. Into money to bring home to the family. However, behind that bustle also hides many worries. Experienced elders often look pensively at the distant sea, remembering the time when they were young, when sharks and flounder were so abundant that it only took a few hours of casting nets to fill the hold. But now each trip is much more difficult. Overexploitation has made fish stocks increasingly sparse. Fishing must go farther, longer and face more dangers. However, for fishermen, the sea is not only a source of life but also a place of flesh and blood. A tradition left by their ancestors. They understand that every scar on their hands, every sleepless night in the storm, every time they cut shark and halibut on the bloody deck is proof of their harsh but proud profession. And like an endless cycle, when this shipment is unloaded at the port, the ship prepares to refuel, mend nets, sharpen knives, ready for a new voyage. Continuing the journey of hunting and cutting meat to survive in the endless ocean, the days at sea follow each other like an endless cycle. The fishermen not only hunt and butcher sharks and flounders to sell for money but also to maintain the tradition that has been ingrained in their lives. On the deck, the processing work never stops. When a shark is brought up, the experienced workers immediately take knives, divide the meat into large pieces. The fins are cut cleanly, hung high on racks, and the thick skin is peeled off for later processing. Each knife stroke is a combination of strength and skill, because just a little carelessness, the sharp blade can cause injury right on the slippery deck. The same goes for flounders. From the time they are pulled out of the net until they become smooth white fillets, it only takes a few minutes, all done in a familiar rhythm, like a dance of labor associated with the wind and waves. During the day, the sun shines down on the deck, the light illuminating the fresh meat, sparkling in the salty space of the sea breeze. At night, under the dim yellow light, fishermen continue their work, sweat mixed with salt vapor and fish blood. Creating a harsh picture. During rare breaks, they sit leaning against the side of the ship, sipping strong tea or a few cigarettes, their eyes still looking out at the dark, deep sea. For them, hunting and butchering is not simply work, but a way of survival, a reason to live. Every time the ship returns with a hold full of sharks and flounder, the whole fishing village bustles. Children cheer, the elderly smile proudly, and women are busy preparing to welcome their husbands and children after a long trip. However, mixed with that joy is always anxiety about the future of the ocean. because resources are not endless. However, fishermen continue to go out to sea, continue to cut meat, because that is the only way to maintain life, to continue the fishing profession from generation to generation. In the harsh but sacred cycle of the ocean, the sea seasons follow one another. Each trip to hunt sharks and flounders is like a bet with nature. On the boat, fishermen have to take shifts day and night. Some cast the line, some check the net, some prepare knives, cutting boards and storage, all operating smoothly like a living machine. When the giant shark is pulled up, the atmosphere becomes tense. The strong movements cause the seawater to splash. White foam covers the side of the boat. Many people must work together to control it to keep it still to cut the meat. The scene is both fierce and brutal, leaving dark red bloodstains mixed with sea salt on the deck. On the contrary, flounders, when pulled up from the deep bottom, create a feeling of silence but heavy. They are flat and large, clinging tightly to the net, making the process of removing them equally difficult. Immediately after boarding the ship, they are processed quickly. Each white fillet is placed immediately on a tray, cleaned of blood and sent straight to the freezer. The trips often do not allow for long rest, because the butchering work must take place continuously according to the catch. The deck becomes a makeshift processing workshop, where the sound of chopping knives, the sound of trawling nets, the sound of the ship's engine and the sound of the ocean waves blend into a harsh melody of fishing. Fishermen are used to the strong fishy smell, used to the feeling of exhaustion but still try, because they understand that each piece of meat, each fin or each flounder fillet is money, a bowl of rice for the whole family. When the ship is full of goods, they turn back to port, carrying with them joy and anxiety. Joy because the trip is successful. Worry because the sea is gradually depleting. But as soon as the ship docked, traders gathered around, weighing each batch of fish, bargaining for each block of meat. The fatigue seemed to disappear, replaced by a sense of pride. They knew that, despite the hardship and danger, the work of hunting and butchering sharks and flounders was still flesh and blood. Breath, and also a testament to the resilience of humans in the face of the vast ocean when the ship is back in port after a long voyage. The fisherman's work is not really over. The shark and flounder meat is transferred to cold storage, where it is further sorted, cleaned and carefully packaged. For shark, the thick, firm meat is cut into square blocks. The liver is sent to a processing facility for oil, and the fins are dried or industrially dried to preserve the flavor. Each part has its own value. Nothing is wasted. Even the bones and skin can be used as materials or preparations. For flounder, the fillets are packed in thick plastic film, placed in styrofoam boxes with ice or deep frozen for long-distance transport. The best meat is selected for the export market. The rest will be distributed to restaurants, wholesale markets or directly to fish markets right on the coast. Fishermen, after many days drifting in the wind and waves, can finally return home, bringing with them the money from their hard work. But behind that joy is always a constant worry. Will there be more fish to catch next season? Or will the sea become increasingly empty? In coastal fishing villages, images of wind-torn ships, tough fishermen with calloused hands, and stories of shark and flounder hunting trips are still common topics around family meals. The elderly recount the past bumper fishing seasons, while the young prepare for the next trip out to sea, where they will once again face danger, with fish blood on the deck and with sudden fierce winds. That cycle of life repeats itself, from hunting to butchering, from hardship to pride, creating a vivid but harsh picture of the seafaring profession. And no matter how the sea changes, for those fishermen, the journey of hunting and butchering sharks and flounders will continue, like a thread connecting the past, present and future of people who live on the power of the ocean. In fact, after each trip to hunt sharks and flounders, fishermen begin a new cycle of preparation for the next trip. The ship is brought ashore to check the engine, change the oil, repair torn nets when dragging flounders on the seabed, or fishing lines bitten by sharks. The knives, wooden cutting boards, and cold storage are also thoroughly cleaned, the blades sharpened to be ready for new butcherings. In the fishing village, the bustling atmosphere never stops, because when one ship docks, another prepares to set sail. People here are used to the smell of fish lingering in the wind, the sound of generators humming all night to run the freezer, along with murmuring conversations about market prices. The presence of sharks and flounders is not only linked to the economy but also becomes a part of the collective memory, a pride of the communities living off the sea. Every time there is a large shipment, the whole village seems to have a festival. Children run after trucks full of white flounder fillets. Adults gather to discuss the price of shark fins. However, in that joy there are also heavy looks, when people realize that the sea is becoming more and more unpredictable. Fish are not as abundant as before, and the cost of each trip is getting higher and higher. However, the seafaring profession cannot stop, because it is the blood that has flowed in the veins of fishermen for generations. They accept going out to sea, accept unexpected storms, accept the lurking dangers when facing ferocious sharks or heavy nets on the deep seafloor. All just to continue the familiar work, hunting and butchering, turning giant creatures of the ocean into a source of life, a continuation of the tradition of their ancestors and a hope for future generations on every trip out to sea. Fishermen carry with them the hope that the sea is still generous enough to reward them with abundant catches of sharks and flounder. As soon as the boat leaves the dock, they start looking out to sea, looking for deep waters where sharks often appear, or wide sandbanks at the bottom where flounders hide. The work seems familiar but never less dangerous, because sharks do not always take the bait obediently. Sometimes they attack back, causing the deck to rock, and the people on board have to use all their strength to control them. Although flounder are not ferocious, they are difficult to detect. Fishermen have to drop hundreds of hooks deep into the seabed or pull nets weighing tons to hope to get a few large ones. Once caught, the butchering process takes place almost immediately, because only quick hands can keep the freshness of the fish intact. With sharks, after cutting off the fins, the workers use a large knife to cut along the body, peeling off each piece of firm meat, red blood spreading all over the deck. With flounder, the operation is gentler but still requires dexterity. Each stroke of the knife separates the white fillet, cleanly and evenly, the salty smell of the sea, the sound of knives clattering, the coordinated shouts, all blend together to create the familiar sound of the seafaring profession. Under the sunlight, the deck seems to turn into a mobile slaughterhouse, where people and the ocean struggle every moment. When the holds are gradually filled with fish meat, the fishermen breathe a sigh of relief, because that is the guarantee of a successful trip. But joy is always accompanied by worry, because they clearly understand that each time they cast their nets, each time they cut the meat, it means the fish resources offshore are gradually depleted. However, they still have to continue, because this is not only a job but also a livelihood, a tradition passed down by their ancestors. And so, the cycle of hunting and butchering sharks and flounders continued, deepening the image of resilient fishermen living with the wind and waves, clinging to the vast ocean. When the ship slowly turned its bow toward the mainland after many days of wandering, the hold was heavy with shark and flounder meat, and the fishermen also felt the hardship of the trip. On the deck, the traces left after butchering were still visible, dark dried fish bloodstains on the wooden floor, sharp knives that had become blunt from continuous cutting, shark fins dangling from cables, and a fishy smell permeating everywhere. The crew took the opportunity to clean the deck, arrange tools,